Imagine falling in love with a TV show so deeply that the characters start to feel like your own family. You watch them grow up, fall in love, face heartbreak, and ride through the most beautiful landscapes you have ever seen. That is exactly what millions of people around the world felt when Heartland first appeared on their screens back in 2007. A simple Canadian ranch show about horses and family turned into something nobody expected. It became a global phenomenon. It made people cry, laugh, and come back every single week for nearly 2 decades. But here is the thing that nobody is talking about enough. The people behind those characters, the real human beings who brought them to life, have gone through some truly jaw-dropping changes since the show first began. Some of them have grown into completely different people. Some have walked away from the spotlight entirely. And one departure broke the hearts of fans all over the world in a way that the show is still recovering from today. So if you have ever watched Heartland and wondered what really happened to the cast after all these years, you are in the right place. Because what you are about to find out is going to surprise you more than you think. It all started in October 2007 on a Canadian television network called CBC. Nobody really knew what to expect from a family drama set on a horse ranch in the rolling green hills of Alberta, Canada. The show was based on a popular book series written by Lauren Brooke, and it told the story of a teenage girl named Amy Fleming who had just lost her mother in a terrible car accident. Amy survived the crash, but her world was shattered. The only thing that kept her going was her deep and almost magical connection with horses. She had a gift for healing broken and troubled horses, the same way her late mother did before her. And along with her older sister Lou, her wise and tough grandfather Jack, and a cast of characters who slowly became like family, Amy began rebuilding her life on the Heartland Ranch. The moment the first episode aired, something clicked with audiences. People were not just watching a show about horses. They were watching a story about grief, about family, about what it means to keep going when life knocks you flat on the ground. Parents watched it with their children. Grandparents watched it with their grandchildren. Young people who had never even been near a farm in their lives found themselves completely pulled into the world of Hudson, Alberta. The show had a warmth to it that was very hard to find anywhere else on television at the time. What made Heartland even more special was that it was filmed in the actual Alberta countryside. The mountains in the background were real. The horses were real. The mud on the boots was real. There was no green screen magic or Hollywood trickery. The cast and crew spent long days under the hot Canadian sun, riding horses, building fences, and living inside the story they were telling. That authenticity came through the screen and straight into the hearts of the people watching at home, and it kept growing. Season after season, year after year, Heartland refused to slow down. In 2014, it officially became the longest-running one-hour scripted drama in the entire history of Canadian television, surpassing a record that had stood for decades. By 2026, the show is now in its 18th season. 18 seasons. That is not just a television achievement. That is a cultural institution. That is a show that has outlasted trends, streaming wars, and an entire generation of viewers growing up and having children of their own who now watch it too. But behind all of that success, behind all of those seasons and all of those episodes, the real story is about the people who made it what it is. The actors who showed up every single day and poured themselves into these characters. Because while the show kept going, their lives outside of it kept moving too. And some of those life changes are the kind that make you stop and think about just how much time has really passed since that very first episode aired all those years ago. There is something rare about an actor who becomes so completely one with their character that you genuinely cannot imagine anyone else playing that role. Amber Marshall is exactly that kind of actor. When she first stepped onto the Heartland set as Amy Fleming back in 2007, she was a teenager with a love for horses and a quiet kind of talent that did not scream for attention. It simply drew you in. And nearly 2 decades later, that same quality is still the beating heart of the entire show. Back in 2007, Amber was just a young girl stepping into a role that would define her entire public life. Amy Fleming was written as a teenager dealing with the worst kind of pain, the sudden loss of her mother, while also discovering that she had an extraordinary ability to connect with horses that no one else could reach. It was a beautiful but demanding role. And what made Amber's performance so powerful right from the start was that she was not pretending to love horses. She genuinely did. She had grown up around them. She understood them in a way that could not be taught in any acting class. When she rode across those Alberta fields in the early seasons, there was no stunt double waiting in the wings. That was Amber, riding hard and riding real. The early seasons of Heartland asked a lot from her. She was young. She was still learning her craft, and she was carrying the emotional weight of an entire show on her shoulders almost every single episode. But she never buckled under that pressure. Instead, she grew into it. Season by season, the audience watched Amy Fleming evolve from a grieving teenager into a strong, capable woman. And right alongside that character, Amber Marshall, the real person, was doing exactly the same thing. Growing, learning, and quietly becoming one of the most respected actresses in Canadian television without ever making a big noise about it. Now in 2026, Amber Marshall is 37 years old and she is still there. Still on the Heartland Ranch. Still playing Amy Fleming in season 18. That alone is remarkable when you think about how rare it is for any actor to stay committed to a single role for nearly 2 decades without burning out or walking away. Most people in the entertainment industry are always chasing the next thing, the bigger movie, the more glamorous opportunity. Amber chose something different. She chose to stay, and that decision has made her into something truly special in the eyes of millions of fans around the world. But her life off-screen is just as interesting as the story playing out on it. Amber lives on a real working ranch, just outside of Calgary, Canada. Not a television set. Not a rented property for Instagram photos. An actual ranch where she wakes up every morning and takes care of real animals. She shares that life with her husband, Shaun Turner, and together they look after horses, dogs, cats, pigs, and chickens. The woman who plays a horse whisperer on television is genuinely living that life when the cameras stop rolling. That kind of authenticity is almost unheard of in today's entertainment world. She has spoken openly about how deeply the show has shaped who she is. The relationships she built on that set, with her cast members, with the horses, and with the crew who showed up every single day in the cold Alberta mornings, those are not just professional memories. They are the foundation of her life. And even as the show enters what many consider to be a bold new chapter in season 18, with Amy navigating a surprising new romantic connection after years of carrying grief, Amber continues to bring a depth and honesty to the role that newer viewers fall in love with just as quickly as those who have been watching since 2007. What makes Amber Marshall's story so compelling in 2026 is not that she became a huge Hollywood star. It is that she chose not to chase that path and build something far more meaningful instead. A life that mirrors the very values her character has always stood for. Loyalty, hard work, love for the land, and a deep commitment to the things and the people that matter most. She is, in every sense of the word, the real version of the character she has spent 19 years playing. And that is not something you can fake. No matter how talented an actor you are, you have spent 14 years of your life playing a character that millions of people across more than 100 countries have fallen completely in love with. You have watched that character grow from a troubled teenage boy with a dark past into a devoted husband, a loving father, and one of the most genuinely good men ever written into a Canadian television drama. And then one day, after all of those years and all of those seasons, you make a decision that stuns the entire fan base and sends shockwaves across the internet. You walk away, not because you were fired, not because of any drama behind the scenes, but because something deep inside you was calling you toward a completely different kind of life. That is the story of Graham Wardle, and it is one of the most fascinating stories to come out of Heartland in all of its 19 years on air. Graham first appeared on Heartland in the very first season back in 2007 as Tyler Borden, better known to fans simply as Ty. On paper, Ty was not supposed to be the kind of character you root for. He showed up at the Heartland ranch as a troubled young man with a criminal record, serving out his probation as a ranch hand after a violent incident involving his abusive stepfather. He wore leather jackets. He rode a motorcycle. He kept his walls up and his words short. Everything about him said stay away. But audiences did the exact opposite. They fell for Borden almost immediately, because underneath all of that hardness there was something real and something deeply human. A young man who had been failed by the people who were supposed to protect him, just trying to figure out if he deserved a better life than the one he had been given. What Graham Wardle did with that character over 14 seasons was nothing short of extraordinary. He took Ty from that guarded, motorcycle-riding outsider and slowly, carefully, and convincingly turned him into the emotional anchor of the entire show. Ty fell in love with Amy. He earned the respect of the tough and unforgiving Jag Bartlett, which fans knew was one of the hardest things any character on that show could ever achieve. He studied to become a veterinarian. He got married. He became a father. And every single step of that journey felt completely believable because Graham played it with a quiet sincerity that never felt like acting. It always felt like truth. But behind the scenes, something else was happening. Something that Graham himself has only recently spoken about with full honesty. As far back as season 10, he had begun to feel a pull away from the world of Heartland. Not a dislike for the show, or the people in it. Quite the opposite. He has described his time on set with genuine warmth, talking about long afternoons waiting between takes where Shaun Johnston would pull out his guitar and the cast would just sit together under the Alberta sun, talking and laughing and being present with each other. Those were the moments he treasured most. Not the big dramatic scenes, but the quiet human ones in between. By season 13, Graham knew in his heart that his time as Borden was coming to an end. He sat down with the writers and had open, honest conversations about how to handle the departure, in a way that did justice to everything the character had meant to so many people. Together they made a decision that was bold and painful and completely right for the story. Borden would not simply disappear or move away. He would die. Not in a small or forgettable way, but in a manner that reflected who he had become. A man who always put the people he loved first, right up until his very last moment. He was shot while trying to protect others, and it was a blood clot from that wound that ultimately took his life in the season 14 premiere, leaving Amy a widow, and leaving millions of viewers absolutely devastated. The reaction from fans was unlike anything the show had ever seen before. Social media flooded with grief. People who had grown up watching Ty and Amy fall in love found themselves genuinely mourning a fictional character the way you mourn someone you actually knew. Because that is the kind of connection Graham Wardle had built with his audience over 14 years. It was not casual television watching. It was an emotional bond that had been carefully constructed one episode at a time, one honest performance at a time, and then came the question that everyone wanted answered. Where did Graham go after all of that? What does a person do when they step away from a role that big, from a show that defined more than a decade of their career? The answer is something that a lot of people in the entertainment world would never have the courage to do. Graham Wardle stepped back almost entirely from public life. He moved away from the spotlight, took a deep breath, and began exploring a quieter and more inward way of living. He has spoken about personal growth, about spirituality, about finally having the space and the silence to figure out who he was outside of the character he had been playing since he was a young man. In a candid and deeply personal interview that surfaced in late 2025, he cleared up many of the rumors that had been swirling around his departure for years, confirming that there was no falling out, no bitterness, and no regret. Just a man listening to his own gut and choosing to follow it somewhere new. In 2026, Graham Wardle is 39 years old and living a life that looks almost nothing like the one his fans imagined for him. He's not chasing Hollywood roles or trying to land the next big series. He is simply living and doing it on his own terms. And while some fans still hold out hope that he might one day return to the Heartland universe in some form, Graham himself has made it clear that the chapter of Borden is closed. Not with anger or sadness, but with gratitude. He has said that Heartland gave him a platform, connected him with an audience in over 100 countries, and created relationships that shaped him as a human being. That is not the farewell speech of someone who has any regrets about the journey. That is the reflection of a man who is at peace with every choice he made, including the hardest one of all. When Graham Wardle walked away from Heartland, a lot of people genuinely believed the show would not survive it. Borden was not just a supporting character. He was half of the central love story that had held the entire emotional structure of the show together for over a decade. Losing him felt like pulling the foundation out from under a building. And yet, against all expectations, Heartland did not collapse. It adapted. It evolved. It found new stories to tell and new ways to make its audience feel something real. And the reason it was able to do that comes down entirely to the remarkable group of people who stayed behind and kept showing up every single day. Shaun Johnston is one of those people, and at 67 years old in 2026, he remains one of the most beloved figures in the entire history of Canadian television. He has been playing Jack Bartlett, the tough and deeply principled grandfather of the Fleming family, since the very first episode aired back in 2007. Think about what that means for a moment. Shaun Johnston has been playing the same character for 19 years. He has shown up to that Alberta ranch through blazing summers and freezing winters, through cast changes and storyline shifts and the kind of behind-the-scenes challenges that come with keeping any long-running production alive. And he has done it all with a consistency and a warmth that has made Jack Bartlett feel less like a fictional character and more like a real grandfather that viewers actually grew up with. Off-screen, Shaun is known as one of the gentlest and most genuine souls on the entire cast. His castmates have spoken about the way he would pull out his guitar during long breaks between filming and play quietly while everyone sat together under the open sky. That is the kind of person he is. Steady, warm, and always present. Michelle Morgan has been equally remarkable in her journey as Lou Fleming. When the show began, Lou was Amy's older sister returning home from a successful life in New York City. Sharp and ambitious and sometimes frustratingly stubborn. Over the seasons, Michelle took that character through marriage, motherhood, adoption, business ventures, heartbreak, and eventually into the world of local politics when Lou became the mayor of Hudson in season 14. Now 44 years old, Michelle has grown alongside her character in a way that feels deeply authentic. She has never chased a kind of fame that takes you away from the work itself. She has stayed committed to the story and to the people telling it, and that commitment has made Lou Fleming one of the richest and most fully realized characters on the show. Chris Potter, who plays Tim Fleming, the complicated and once estranged father of Amy and Lou, is another story worth telling on its own. Tim was never supposed to be easy to like when the show began. He was a man who had chosen the roar of the rodeo crowd over his own family, a man who had let alcohol and poor choices define too many years of his life. But Chris Potter took that complexity and built something genuinely moving out of it over the course of 18 seasons. At 65 years old in 2026, Chris is still there, still bringing Tim to life, and still finding new layers in a character that has had more than enough time to become one-dimensional but never has. His presence on the show is a quiet kind of anchor, the same way a father who has finally figured himself out becomes an anchor for the people around him. Jessica Amelie, who played the fan favorite Mallory Wells in the earlier seasons, took a different path. At 31 years old, she has stepped away from Heartland and moved into other creative projects, carrying with her the experience of having been part of something truly special during her formative years as an actress. Fans still talk about Mallory with tremendous affection, and the humor and heart that Jessica brought to that role remains one of the most fondly remembered parts of the show's earlier chapters. Alicia Newton, who joined the cast as the young Georgie Fleming Morris, has grown up almost entirely in front of the Heartland audience. Now 24 years old, the girl that viewers first met as a child has become a young woman, and watching that transformation happen in real time across multiple seasons has been one of the more quietly remarkable things the show has managed to do. Carrie James, who plays the lovable and endlessly entertaining Caleb O'Dell, is still a firm part of the Heartland world at 39, and his energy continues to bring a lightness to the show that balances out its heavier emotional moments beautifully. And then there is the show itself in 2026, because Heartland as a living and breathing piece of television is a story worth talking about just as much as the people inside it. Season 18 is currently airing, and it is pushing the story into genuinely exciting new territory. Amy Fleming, after years of carrying the grief of losing Ty, is building a new romantic connection with a man named Nathan Price JRB, and that storyline alone has reignited passionate conversations among the fan base about where Amy's journey should go next. Lou Fleming is locked in a tense battle to keep the family cattle business alive after losing a major supplier, and her clashes with Jack and Tim over how to handle the crisis have brought some of the most gripping family drama the show has produced. In years, since January 2025, Heartland began airing on the Hallmark Channel in the United States, opening the door to an entirely new wave of viewers who are discovering the show for the very first time. It is also available on Netflix and several other streaming platforms globally, which means that in 2026, someone in a small apartment in a city that has never seen a working ranch in real life can sit down on a quiet evening and fall in love with the Fleming family the same way audiences did nearly 2 decades ago. That kind of reach is extraordinary for a show that started as a modest Canadian family drama filmed in the Alberta countryside. What Heartland has built over 19 years is not just a television legacy. It is a community. Millions of people around the world feel a genuine and personal connection to this show, to these characters, and to the actors who have given so much of their lives to bringing them to life. Some of those actors are still there, still riding across those beautiful Alberta fields, still showing up every morning ready to tell another chapter of a story that somehow keeps finding new ways to matter. Some have moved on to new chapters of their own, carrying the experience of Heartland with them like something precious that shaped who they became. But perhaps the most honest way to sum up what this show has meant, and what its cast represents nearly 2 decades after that very first episode, is this: Heartland taught its audience that loss does not have to be the end of your story. That families are messy and complicated and worth fighting for. That the land beneath your feet and the people standing on it with you are among the most important things life has to offer. And whether you are watching it for the first time tonight or you have been there since 2007, that message lands just as hard and just as true as it always has. The faces may have changed, the seasons have come and gone, but the heart of Heartland is still beating. And in 2026, it shows absolutely no signs of stopping.